Fantastic. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm just going to give you a sort of whistle-stop tour of how to deal with IVAs. I know, as Jules has already alluded to, they seem to be on the increase, those and DROs. So just to explain who I am, I'm a partner at Wilkin Chapman, which is a debt recovery firm based in Lincolnshire. As you can tell by my accent, I'm not from Lincolnshire. I am from Yorkshire. Yorkshiremen are renowned for having short arms and deep pockets. So if anybody needs to look after your money, it's me. Just to sort of give you an outline of IVA. So effectively, if you receive an IVA, it's a proposal that the debtor or customer will want to agree with you a way of repaying their outstanding debts. And it's an agreement which an insolvency practitioner would serve upon you. And the idea is to divide the money that that individual makes to the IP to all creditors. And what you'll find in the proposal is what you'll get back in terms of pounds, pence against the actual debt that you owe or is owed. The IVA will only be approved if there's an agreement of 75% of all creditors. So that's the crucial figure that you need to look at. So if your debt represents 25% or more of the overall creditors in that proposal, then effectively you will influence the outcome of that IVA proposal. And that's the most important factor. If it's less than that, then you're obviously reliant on another creditor, either supporting your proposal or rejecting it if that's what you wish to do. If the IVA, the individual doesn't maintain payments during the IVA period, then that will be cancelled by the insolvency practitioner. Usually where they don't maintain the contributions on a monthly basis. Usually the IP should make the individual bankrupt. That should be part of the proposal, but what you'll find, certainly over the last few years, is that the IP doesn't include that in the proposal at all. So there's no obligation on the IP that if the IVA fails, that they make the individual bankrupt. The first tip that I would give anybody is that once you receive the proposal for an IVA, is make a note and a record of the information that's contained in the proposal. So there's some really useful information. Work on the basis that if that IVA fails, then you may need to consider further recovery action. So things like the IP should set out if the individual is employed, what the salary is, what they're earning, what the income expenditure is, and if they own property. So if you think about that from a recovery perspective, if the IVA fails, and you need to take further recovery action, then you might want to consider doing an attachment of earnings or a charging order if applicable. So effectively, the IVA process will be the individual will engage with the insolvency practitioner's office. They will draft a proposal which outlines the IVA terms, what they will pay into it on a monthly basis, over what period, and what the return will be for creditors. That IP should then serve you with notice of the meeting of creditors. Usually that meeting of creditors will now take place virtually. So historically, you would have received a document that sets out all the details. What you might find now is you receive a 2-page letter with a link that gives you the details of the IVA. So it's important that you access that link, and that link will then give you access to the actual proposal document and the proof of debt and the proxy form. So the proof of debt is important because the debtor, what they will do at the outset is they'll liaise with the IP, and they will set out all the creditors that they owe money to and set out what the value of that is. You just need to cross-reference that they've given the correct information. The IP should be under an obligation to cross-reference that and ensure that they receive documentation to verify that outstanding debt. Invariably, they don't. So it's important to check that the actual debt value that the debtor has given to the IP is correct. If it's more, if your debt is more than what the debtor has set out, then clearly that will affect the arrangement in a negative way, is that there will then be a reduction in the return for creditors. So you might want to suggest that the IP sends out a revised proposal if there's an increase in the outstanding debt values. The proxy form is something that you should just submit whether you wish to accept or reject. I'd always encourage a creditor to do so, just for avoidance of doubt, and make sure that your claim is registered and acknowledged by the IP. So as I've said, the important factor is that 75%. That's the crucial figure. If it's less than that in terms of the creditors that are going to accept the arrangement, then the IVA will get rejected. If it's accepted, then you are all bound by the proposal, and whatever the term of the proposal is, you just need to cease action immediately once you receive notification that the IVA has been approved. Effectively, the nominee will become supervisor to monitor the IVA terms. So that would be the IP will monitor the payment contributions, and then they will distribute them on a pro rata basis to all creditors. Usually they will do that every quarter, and I'll come on to some of the modifications that you might want to suggest regarding payment arrangements. So the IVA contracts, the notice of the IVA will confirm the exact terms of the IVA proposal, what will be paid to the IP, and when they will pay out, and at what rate they will pay out to all creditors. So just some samples of some modifications that you might want to think about. So I'm hoping there's no IPs on this line. If there is, I apologise in advance. What you will find is that the IP's fees are relatively high. I would always question them. I would always try and seek a reduction if you can, and make sure that they're capped at a certain percentage, i.e. 15% of the distribution to creditors. So generally, I think the IP's fees are probably around about £1,900. We've pushed back on a few proposals recently where we've got that down to £1,500. What does that mean for creditors? It just means that there's more money going into the pot, and it means that you might get a greater return in terms of the debt that's outstanding. I would carefully monitor the income expenditure assessment. As I've said, the IP is under an obligation to try and verify salary, creditor values, and any income expenditure assessment that they will undertake. Invariably, they don't. So if there's anything that looks a little bit untoward, then by all means question it. And if necessary, say, look, if it's not being questioned, then I'm proposing to reject the proposal. One of the important things that we've looked at recently is a request for contributions from the debtor to be split between the nominee's fees and distribution to creditors. So what you'll find on most IVAs is that the contributions that are made for, say, the first year are all taken up by the IP's fees. So invariably what will happen is creditors don't see that initial payment in terms of the dividend contributions until month 12 or month 13. What we would suggest is that any contributions that are made by the individual are split as a minimum on a 50-50 basis. So 50% goes towards the IP's fees and 50% goes towards the creditors. At some point, the IP's fees will get settled in full, and then thereafter, then the contributions can increase to creditors. I'd certainly suggest that as a minimum. You might get some pushback from the IPs. They might say it goes down to 70-30, but at least it's better than waiting 12 months to get your first dividend from the IP. Couple of tips. So have you been treated fairly? Do you think that you've received notice in time? Has full disclosure been made by the debtor to the IP? So the debtor is obliged to give full disclosure of their financial situation, so that the IP can ensure that all creditors receive the maximum return possible. And if you've got reason to believe that the debtor is withholding information that could alter the proposal significantly, in most cases, you should seek disclosure from the nominee and ask them to clarify anything that's uncertain. So, for example, if they own property, things like that, what you might find is that properties involved, they may have finance that's subject to HP. So just check in terms of any finance when that's due to be concluded. So if that's going to be finished in, say, month 12, is after that finance is finished, is there going to be an increase in contributions to the proposal and to the IP? Just check that carefully. And again, with property, just check if they own property, if there's any potential for that property to be realised in some shape or form, which would mean that there's a greater increase in contributions going into the pot. Have IVA procedures been followed? If necessary, seek guidance. Here's a first from a lawyer. If you want somebody to give you advice or guidance, then by all means, my email's on the last slide. Send me a copy of the IVA proposal. I'm more than happy to look through it and review it for you and give you some initial advice. It will be brief, but I promise you I will not charge. Don't tell my partners that, but I won't charge for it. Just keep an eye on the stated debt values. As I've said, just check that the value that the individual has given to the IP is correct. If it's not, put that on the proxy form and make sure that's picked up by the IP, because that could have a material difference in whether the IVA proposal is accepted or rejected. It might mean that other creditors who are minded to accept, if they then receive a revised proposal which shows that there's going to be a lesser return to them, they may want to reject it. What you'll find is creditors have a minimum threshold as to what they're prepared to accept or reject, and it might fall below that threshold. And then the last tip is we're seeing a greater increase on where creditors are not served with the proposal and only find out about the IVA after the event. Invariably, that's usually where the creditor, surprise, surprise, has more than 25% of the creditor value. So if that's the situation that you find yourselves in, then immediately report that back to the IP and ask that the meeting of creditors reconvened under section 262 of the Insolvency Act, because effectively there's been an irregularity in the process, and you as a creditor have been unfairly prejudiced by that process. So you have a right to vote at the meeting of creditors. You certainly have a right to vote if your debt represents more than 25% of the overall creditor value. So all you need to do is quote section 262 into the body of the response. So as I say, that's a very, very quick whistle-stop tour. I think I'm just about on time, Brent. But if there's any questions, appreciate after the event. If you think of anything, there's my email address, and I'm more than happy to pick things up. And again, I'll reiterate, that'll be free of charge.
Yeah, you've already started the comments coming.
Sorry.
Free legal advice, love it. Yeah, I think that's going to go viral.
I hope it doesn't, for my sake.
Right, brilliant. Okay, does anybody have any questions for Mark before we finish? Michael?
Thanks, Brent. Yeah, hi, Mark. It was really good refresher. Thanks, because it's a bit rusty on IVA, so it was really useful. I just wondered, is it a similar kind of process and principles with a company voluntary arrangement?
It is. It's exactly the same, Michael. Yeah. So if you get a company CVL, company voluntary arrangement, it's exactly the same process. Again, you'll get notification of the meeting of creditors. Most of these are done virtually these days, so you'll receive a notice with a link and usually a password that you can access the documentation. And it's exactly the same process in terms of it's got to have 75% of creditors approving the CVA.
Yeah, thought so. Thanks, Mark.
Right, okay. I think that's about it. We're just 3 minutes shy of the 12 o'clock, so we're going to let you go so you can have your lunch. So I'd like to say thank you very much to Jules for the presentation, and to Mark as well. So the presentation, I would imagine, will get sent out by the CICM, and you'll be able to access that. Thank you very much. Nice to see you all. This is me bowing out from the East Midlands branch, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. So have a good lunch and see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brent.
Thanks, Brent.
Thank you.
Bye.